Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
Friday, and all of our guests today, including Thomas Drance, standing by, brought to you by the Bayside Oceanfront Resort. Looking for a midweek escape close to home? BC residents save 15% on... You okay?
Oh, yeah.
Mumbling away over there. BC residents save 15% on weekday stays.
I forgot my mic was on.
At the Bayside Oceanfront Resort. That could have been worse. In Parksville. Relax by the ocean. Enjoy it. Rick's relaxing right now. Enjoy great dining and wine with Island Hospitality. Book now at BaysideResortParksville.com. Here's somebody who never relaxes, always on the job, from The Athletic. Thomas Drance, how are you, sir?
Yeah, you're not wrong. I am a little high-strung. That's true.
Well, I'd rather have that than low energy, okay?
Fair. Well, no one accuses me of that. I'll tell you that much.
We have two rules on this show when it comes to guests. We don't want low energy, and we don't want high maintenance. And you are just absolutely fabulous. You're one of our favorites.
Oh, yeah.
Hey,
I'm one of two anyway.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so Jonathan Lekkerimaki, is he back in the Vancouver Canucks top six, Thomas?
No. And that's not a reasonable spot to put him in. Right? I mean, just given his age, given the physical development that he still needs to go through, I think, to handle those sorts of matchups and that sort of minutes burden across, an 82-game professional season. I mean, expecting him or penciling him in to be a top six forward isn't the right way to do it. Not because he can't, but because it's not the best thing for him. Right? You don't want him to have that level of responsibility. You don't want him to have that level of pressure. You don't want him to have that difficult of sledding from a matchups and minutes perspective. You want him to be a middle six guy, right? You play him up the lineup some games when you need him, but 12 minutes a night at 5-on-5 with some power play time. That's what you're looking for from him next season. The example that I'd point you to is Matthew Coronado with the Calgary Flames. This past year, who was a big X factor for that team as they surprised a lot of people, myself among them, and sort of hung tough in the Western Conference playoff race, finished ahead of the Vancouver Canucks, which no one would have expected at the outset of the campaign. And Coronado being sort of an X factor, gifted offensive presence in that role was a big reason why. Like, for me, that's the model, that's the trajectory that you're hoping to see Lekkerimaki be on across next season. But yeah, I mean, more than anything, it's been a tough playoffs for him. It's been a remarkable campaign for him on the whole. His first North American season saw him dominate for nearly 40 games at the American League level and then play really well and show some significant flashes at the NHL level and then hit a wall in the playoffs. Now, he came up big for the Abbotsford Canucks in one of their biggest games of the year, and that's great because now, instead of him going into this summer, with this sort of these question marks of can he do it at the toughest time of year? Can he do it? Is he big enough? Right? Like now he's going to end the year on a positive, and that's fantastic for him. He's not going to have a long summer, gentlemen, but he needs to have a good one. In terms of adding strength to his core, finding ways to better protect pucks along the wall. Like there's a lot of development physically for him to go through. I think if he's going to be an impact top line or top six guy in Vancouver next season. I'm certainly not penciling him into the top six next year, but I'll leave the light on for him to be, a Coronado level difference maker for this team next season. I think he's got that type of skill where he could take that type of leap next year.
Hey, Thomas, Matt Duchene signing in Dallas, you and I both reporting he was very high on the Canucks wish list for July 1st. So what do the Canucks do now that Duchene is not a possibility in Vancouver up the middle of the ice?
Well, I mean, first of all, I do think the organization is reading the market. They've had a little more time to gauge what some of this looks like and talk to rival teams and get a sense of exactly who's going to be there on July 1. And, it's a competitive marketplace. And I think the organization is prepared to scale back some of their ambitions and make contingency plans and figure out another way to approach this. In an ideal world, I think they'd love to add 2 centermen between now and July 4th. And guess what? They're going to try to do that. If they don't do it, it's not going to be for a lack of trying. Patrick Allvin is grinding away on the phones. The club will be turning over every rock. Long hours ahead for the crew down at Rogers Arena, Canucks hockey operations leadership over the next 2 weeks. Like, they're going to do what they can. But if the market doesn't bear what they want responsibly at the right price point, the right types of players, I think they're prepared to do to sort of trace a different path here. I think they're prepared to try and bolster their center depth a little bit lower down the lineup and have Philip Hedl as a second-line center instead of a second-line winger or a third-line winger. I think that's something that Adam Foote's comfortable devising a game plan to accommodate. I think that's something the team is comfortable with overall, or at least is making peace with here. I do think there's a growing sense of pessimism that the club's going to be able to necessarily accomplish everything they want to accomplish by, the time the free agent frenzy simmers down here. But, one smart hockey guy who I was talking to this week suggested to me that, as much as every team's going to spend, we're going to see a $500 million at least get spent here across the next 11 days. We're going to see a ton of big high profile trades and, significant surprises. Like, it's going to be a wild time across the next 2 weeks. So buckle up. And then when the dust settles, people will look at their teams on paper and everyone will be happy. And come November 15th, there's going to be 8 or 9 teams, fully a quarter of the league, that's looking at their roster and desperate to make a deal, right? So the you're not ultimately judged. You are, but you're not ultimately judged on what your team looks like on July 2nd, right? You're judged by what your team looks like when the season ends, when the book is closed on what you accomplished. And so there's some road to run here, but yeah, I am getting a sense of a growing sense of pessimism about this club being able to accomplish everything they'd hoped to, Rick. And I think the Duchesne sort of extension in Dallas, the fact that he didn't make it to July 1, I suspect that that's part of shaping that sort of internal feeling and those internal discussions about sort of what a scaled back contingency plan looks like in terms of building this team up for next season without, doing something desperate or reckless to sort of upgrade the roster.
I look at the goaltenders, Lankin and Demko and Silov. Silov's boy, oh boy, he's doing great.
Yeah.
So what do you do now? You had an interesting note yesterday that the Canucks really want to sign Demko. But if they sign Demko, what happens to Silovs, who needs waivers to get down to Abbey next year? So they got all these riches in net, but how do you handle them all?
Yeah, and there's clearly a surplus there, and there's clearly a surplus on D, right? And we know that their needs are massive up front, emergency level massive, Rick, right? And so, I think it's pretty obvious that one way or another, a couple blue liners, maybe a goalie, will be part of some packages, or the club will have to consider including those players in packages that bring, forward reinforcements back to this organization, or at least draft picks that the team could use to buy those reinforcements or seek them out elsewhere. So, yeah, I'll be watching this closely for sure. I do think the truth, though, is that their first choice remains to have a Lankin and Demko combo. And even if that looks like an $11 million spend in net in terms of the cap resources allocated, Rick, I think there's an understanding like, okay, people will criticize us the day that happens. Oh, how can you have that much money in net? But team that just won the Stanley Cup had a $10 million goalie in net. Right, the New York Rangers are regularly deep in the playoffs. They have a $10 million goalie. And by the way, having $11 million invested in net, that might make people, say, what are you doing? But 3 years ago, the equivalent of $11 million in 2 years is going to be $8 million during the flat cap era, right? And if any team had a $6.5 million goaltender who was a good starter and a $1.5 million backup, for sort of the same proportion of the cap, no one would have batted an eye. So I think the growing cap environment, I think, has sort of enhanced the club's comfort potentially with having 2 big money goaltenders as a platoon and sort of building out their strength in net, especially with the sort of revamped state of the blue line, given sort of what they're looking at in terms of roster construction here.
All right. Dollywell's got the stopwatch going here. Thomas, are the Dallas Stars interested in Manny Malhotra?
I have no indication that they are. It seems like they're pretty happy with their internal candidates, but it doesn't really square for me, gentlemen, why, if they're so happy with their internal candidates, that this process is dragging out so long. Like, why was a coach not named this week, given that the cup was awarded on Tuesday, if you're just going to hire a guy that you already have in the organization? So the fact that the longer this goes, right, if we get to Monday, if we get to Tuesday of next week and there's no hire, my eyebrows are going to be furrowed no matter what anyone tells me is actually going on with the situation.
28 seconds.
Is that fair, Rick?
28
is
seconds.
That fair, Rick?
28 seconds.
The longer this goes, the more interesting it is.
Hold on. You had the 28 seconds. Stop right there. That was excellent.
28 seconds.
I just want to hear Rick. I just want to hear Rick's take on that.
Yeah,
the longer this goes, the more interesting it is. That's my point.
He wasn't paying attention.
Up till now, I don't have anybody telling me Dallas is waiting for Manny Malhotra. Obviously, that could change.
And obviously we'll be very interested if we get to next week without the Dallas Stars deciding on one of their internal candidates.
Okay, now I'm going to go. Well, hold on a second here. I have one other question to ask because we get I'm breaking my own rules here. I'm going way too long, but we get this a lot in the inbox. Give us the timeline here. You leave the Florida Panthers organization, and all of a sudden they have a lot of success. Is that just a coincidence?
No, it's not. No, it's not.
That's not how it went.
No.
Tell us the story.
Well,
Stopwatch.
The Florida Panthers organization in the summer of 2019, and the next year they missed the playoffs, or actually they made the play-in and lost to the New York Islanders, but they would have missed the playoffs by a lot. They were like the 22nd best team by point percentage, a completely lifeless group. It was after they changed management that they took off. What do you think's more likely, gentlemen, that replacing the PR guy caused them to rocket ship up the standings, or that replacing the general manager did? I'll let you decide.
Well, the inbox is wondering. That's all I have to say. Yeah, but you cleared it up there, and I think that was under 28 seconds, as a matter of fact.
No, it's 29.
All right, we're over now, thanks to me. Thanks, Thomas.
Cheers, boys. Be well.